we are in the home stretch. Are you excited about that? Woo. And the sun is out, so we're not going to be going home in storms, right? But Bishop says it's a little humid out there too, though. All right, so we have talked about learning your own faith story. And then we talked about how to first start that, doing relational service. And then the second step was, how do we share our faith stories in small groups? And then we talked about how to share our faith stories in worship. And then we talked about how to share stories out in the community with the unchurched. And we briefly touched on that in the first session this morning, but I wanted to spend our last hour here talking about, what does that look like? How do we really put teeth into that? You're back on the front row. Thank you. My young people, they didn't want me to be without them. Thank you. So how to be a 21st century missionary. How did that word missionary hit you? It's a little scary. You know, sometimes I think of missionaries as people to go to other countries and share Jesus, right? But, you know, we've sent a lot of missionaries to a lot of places from the U.S., and do you know that they're starting to send missionaries from other countries back to the U.S. because we're losing the battle, right? So what if we all took responsibility and considered ourselves missionaries? So that's what I want you to open your mind up to in this last hour today, is how do we become not just missionaries, but 21st century missionaries? Because I'm thinking that looks a little different, perhaps, than what it's looked like in the past. And it always goes to sleep, it seems like, between sessions here. All right, so first of all, before we can ever build a relationship, we first have to be out in places where we can meet new people. So that means we got to get out of our normal places, or we got to get our blinders off, if you will, and we've got to see people in a new way. You know, we're busy people. Is there anybody in here that just isn't busy? We're all busy people. And I think we rush through life. One of my books is called Full Schedules, Barren Souls. How's that for getting in your face? And it talks about the busyness of our lives, that we sometimes fill our lives with things to do and sometimes with stuff. But many times the holes that we're trying to fill with all of that stuff is really the hole of our lack of relationship with Christ. And most of the people in the world don't even know, all those unchurched folks, I think, are also dealing with those holes and trying to fill them in other ways. So our own busyness gets in the way of even being available to others. So first of all, we have to slow down a little bit. I know that just feels like it's not going to be real easy to do. But are we faithful servants of Jesus Christ? And if we are, isn't that what we're called to do? It isn't the evangelism committee, it isn't the pastor, but each and every one of us is called to share our faith. If we are disciples, we are shared to call our faith. So how does that look in the 21st century? So first of all, you got to have a plan. Now, okay, it's a seatbelt moment, and somebody told me on break, I don't think that sometimes it's seatbelt moments. You know, when you're on those thrill rides and those padded shoulders come down over you, and then the bar comes and locks into place, and maybe a crash helmet. I've been told that maybe it's really more like that instead of a seatbelt. But stay with me here for a minute. Sometimes we as laity have expectations of our pastor to be out in the community. What does that really mean? And what's the intention? I think so many times in churches we don't really decide what's the intentional purpose. What are we trying to accomplish here? So when we say, Pastor, be out in the community, what does that mean? And what are we trying to accomplish? Well, we want the church to be visible. Well, what does that mean? I can put a bumper sticker on the side of the car and have visibility. Is that what you're talking about? I think at the core what we're talking about is relationship building. So, Pastor, we want you to go to Kiwanis, and Pastor, we want you to go to the chamber, and Pastor, we want you to go to the Lions Club, and Pastor, we want you to go to PTA meetings and whatever they are. And the intention is visibility, and I think we want the church to be known in the community. But here's where I want us to maybe think about this a little bit. So if the plan is relationship building, are those the best places to be hanging out to build relationships with unchurched? So what we have to think through is, for your local Lions Club or whatever group we're thinking of, who's hanging out there? Are they churched folks or are they unchurched folks? Because many times what we find is that the people we're hanging out with are just other church people in civic organizations. So let's think about it more intentionally. Where can I go and hang out with people that are unchurched? So rather than just having this blanket of, here's your checklist, Pastor, what if we instead, I know there's accountability that the laity are thinking, but how am I going to know my pastor's out there? Well, because new people will be coming in on Sunday. But also it's, so, Pastor, tell us, what new people are you meeting? And where are you finding that? So, yeah, your pastor may need to go to the bar. And if your pastor goes to the bar, I don't need you starting rumors going, okay, DS, we need to talk. Now, we're hanging out in the bar to build relationships with the unchurched. Let me just get that clear. Okay? But where are the people who are unchurched hanging, and are we intentionally putting ourselves in those places? And I'm going to say, yes, pastors and laity, the same goes for us. If all the places that you're already hanging out with is all church people, find some new hangout places. But my guess is that many of the places where you hang out, there are lots of unchurched people. Oh, I couldn't talk about that. But folks, when we build relationships with people, there comes opportunities that you are granted through the Holy Spirit to open up those conversations. Some of you have heard my story before, and some of you have seen me with my Diet Coke. Yes, I always say, hi, my name is Kay Cote, and I'm a Diet Cokeaholic. I just own it. So I try not to have it at home. Because if I really want it, that means I have to go get it, and sometimes that's a deterrent, you know what I mean? So I was on my way out of town, and I drive into the local convenience store, and I go up to the counter and have my Diet Coke, because, fountain is better. That's the best kind, in my opinion. And so I have to go and get a fountain Diet Coke with crushed ice in styrofoam. That's the ultimate. Sonic, yeah. I saw Sonic cups come in today, and y'all, I was terribly jealous when I saw the Sonic cups come in this morning. And so I put my Diet Coke on the counter, and Sandy behind the counter, who I'd never met before, she was new there, said to me, "What do you coach?" I said, "What?" She said, "What do you coach? I noticed your license plate." I said, oh, my license plate. My license plate says Coach K on it. And I said, well, I coach pastors and churches. And she said, what? And so I said it again, and again she said, what? So I began to explain it, and she was intrigued by it. And so we had this whole ongoing conversation. So every time I would go in, I would try to go in when Sandy was working. And we would, she would always say, so where are you headed to now? You know, what are you speaking about this time? And she was intrigued by the stories and what I did. So I began to build this relationship with Sandy, and she knew me only by Coach K. And then, folks, it happened. When you least expect it, it happens. So I stroll in one day, and Sandy is standing behind the counter, and a person with her is kind of over to the side, chit-chatting with her. And Sandy says to me, hey, Kay, come over here. I want you to meet my friend. So she introduced me to her friend and said what an unusual occupation I have. And it happened. And I really went, really? I'm in a hurry today? Really? And so God and I argued a little bit. I went, okay, but you got to cover me on this. So I said, Sandy, is it okay if I share a little bit of why I do what I do with you and your friend? And she said, oh, I love that. And I went, oh, crap. Do I have to put anything in the bucket for that, Bishop? I don't know. Yeah. So I said, so Sandy, you remember a few months ago that that there was this lottery, this scratch-off ticket. Yeah, this is a Methodist story. There's a scratch-off ticket. I am who I am. And I said, you know, it's over the $60 drawer total. You know, you're not supposed to cash out anything over $60. And I said, and it was a new employee, and they validated, and they shouldn't have, but once you validate it, you can't give it back. And she said, oh, I heard about that. She said it was a new employee, and he wasn't supposed to do that, and they had to call the manager in who just worked a double to open the safe, and, oh, yeah, I heard about that. And I said, well, that was actually my husband. And she said, really? I said, well, that's not really why I do what I do. We're not there yet. And I said, that was the beginning of what my husband calls the luckiest week of his life. And I said, so it started on that Saturday night with a little Monopoly scratch-off winner. And then the following Saturday, or the following Thursday after that Saturday night, this is what happened, Sandy. I said, my husband was at work, regular day, and I was actually on a coaching call. And I noticed that the other line was ringing, my husband's office, not his cell number, but his office. I thought that's kind of strange, but, you know, he leaves a message because he knows I'm on the phone a lot with my job. And then I noticed, like, 2 minutes later, the same number ringing again, and then a third time. I thought, you know, you just kind of got that feeling. And so I kind of rushed through that call, and I called back the office, and one of my husband's employees answered the phone and said, okay, you need to know that Bob, my husband's name is Bob has collapsed, and he's in an ambulance on his way to the hospital. He said, I don't know any more details than that, but he was unconscious. And I said, so where are they taking him? And he told me. So I rounded up my son, and we got in the car, and we were on our way. and my cell phone rang, and it was my husband's cell phone. And my husband has a very dry sense of humor and kind of an unusual sense of humor. And so I answered the phone, and I said, "Hello?" And he said, "Hello." And I said, "What's going on?" "Well, it appears that I took an inconvenient nap." I said, "You did what?" And suddenly I hear a lot of commotion on the phone, and then it's the ER physician who took his phone away and said, "You need to be on your way right now." And I said, "We're en route right now." And she said, "No, you don't understand. Right now." And I said, "Well, we're still about 10 minutes away." And she said, "Has anyone told you what's happened yet?" And I said, "Well, not besides the inconvenient nap." And she said, "Your husband not only collapsed, but they had to use the paddles on him not once, but twice to bring him back." And she went on to say, he is on his way to the cath lab. So what happened is that just 3 blocks away from my husband's office was the fire station with the paramedics. And my husband came to consciousness as they were putting him, for only a few moments, into the ambulance to say, "Take me to the Heart Institute." And then one of the best heart surgeons happened to be in the hospital that day, that happened to be able to save his life because he had what they called the widowmaker, where only about 15% survive. And I said, "You see, Sandy, that's who I call my God." And he aligned all those things to be able to happen so that I wasn't part of those statistics and was a widow with a 16-year-old. So, Sandy, that's why I do what I do, because I want other people to know that there is someone that cares for each and every one of us and is there in our walk with us each and every day. I didn't have anybody but my son sitting next to me, but I knew that Jesus was right there with me that whole time. And I said, "So, Sandy, even though it's a weird occupation, it gives meaning to me, and I believe it's who I'm called to be and what I'm called to do." Now, there were 3 of us then were puddles in the middle of the convenience store. And so I kindly picked up my Diet Coke and went on my way, and then God and I had another little talk. And about 3 days later, I went back into this convenience store to see Sandy. And as I walked to the counter with my Diet Coke, Sandy said, Kay, I've been thinking, I've been wondering. I work on Sundays, but do you happen to know of a church that has worship on Saturday night that I might be able to attend? Well, do I know a church that has a Saturday night service? I said, is there a particular kind of denomination that you're drawn to? And she said, well, I have some roots as being a United Methodist. Now, and then it was issued the invitation, and can I take you to a worship service with me? Folks, that's what it looks like. Now, had I not answered, okay, first it was a little nudge, and then it was a really big knock over the head before I really did what God had asked me to do. But how many times do we go through life and miss those opportunities? That's what I'm talking about, of having your radar engaged as we go about life in order to be open and to see those opportunities. Now, was I able to go in there and tell that story the first time or the second time or the third time? No, it wouldn't have mean a hill of beans difference until I had somewhat of a relationship with her. And then you'll know. It is no perfect answer of saying, well, on the fourth time is when you share your faith story. You'll know it. But folks, it doesn't have to be a lightning bolt kind of moment that I just shared with you. I mean, I say sometimes, I see God when, like, my son actually picks up the phone and calls me. Those are God moments to me, right? Or when unsolicited, I even get a text from him saying, "Love you, Mom." The other day I was working out of town and I called and we were talking about something and when we hung up, he said, "Hey, Mom, be careful." Now, I've said that to him for 20 years. It was the first time my son ever said, "Hey, Mom, be careful coming home." That was a God moment. So, folks, look for, first of all, your God moments. And then secondly, be open to the opportunities that God places in front of you of building relationships with people so that you can do that you can share your faith moments. But you've got to be intentional about it. In some ways, it's kind of an art and just being open to it, but there's also ways of being intentional. So in other words, Pastor, this is kind of like we need to learn how to be church planters again. When I'm working with church planters, it's like, okay, you've got to get 10 new names every day. That means you're out there. So pastors in existing churches, it's not 10 names a day, but how many names is it a week? And is there any intentionality of collecting names and building relationships? So, laity, we cannot have expectations of our pastors being in our office ready to answer the phone. Because every moment they spend in their office is a moment they don't have in reaching someone new. I talk about 3 buckets, primary buckets for your pastors to be spending their time. And one of those is around a passionate worship experience. It's the sermon prep. It's working with the various teams and so. A third of our time that. A third of our time equipping leaders. Being with leaders, equipping leaders, doing the visionary work. And a third of our time outside in the mission field. Now, some of you are going, where's the pastoral care? It's in equipping leaders. How are we doing our own congregational care to some? Now, pastors, I'm not saying you're off the hook for the hospital calls and the big stuff. But laity, our expectations of having our pastor there when we have an ingrown toenail and a sniffle needs to stop. Was that a harness moment? So some of it we have to shift how we think about our pastors using their time and also us being open as laity of the possibilities of starting a conversation. So, how much time are you spending with the unchurched? And this is not just a pastor's question, this is a laity question. So some of it is, where are the places you're already hanging out? And are you looking for places and people who are unchurched? The other thing that we have to do is, I say that many of our pastors and even staff, paid and unpaid staff, are spending a whole lot of time being firefighters. It's what is the burning fire on my desk today that I got to put out before I can do anything else. Rather than, can we do things that are the important rather than the urgent? Because the urgency sucks up our time and leaves us no time to be intentional about building relationships. So we really have to think through, what are our priorities? So if our mission is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world, and it is, then how are we spending our time and our resources to make sure that's happening? Because my guess is we're fighting the little fires that don't really mean anything in the big picture. But we get sucked into those that don't leave us the time to be out and about with new people. So let's think through some strategies of how we can be in places with unchurched. So where are the places you already like to hang out? So if you like to ride motorcycles and you're hanging out with motorcycle people, are you purposely looking and building relationships with those that are unchurched? Or do you belong to a Christian motorcycle club? Think about member guest events. And what I mean by this is, let's say you have a golf tournament that you've been doing for years. So next year when you do the golf tournament, the only way that you as a church member get to participate in the golf tournament is if you bring an unchurched person with you. That's your ticket in, is somebody on your elbow that's unchurched. Now, that could be a fishing whatever, that could be a quilting whatever. It's what are the things we're already doing that if we thought about it, it would be an opportunity for an unchurched person too. Sometimes we just have to work outside of our comfort zones. So, some of the things we have to slow down. So one of the things is, let's say you get gas in your car. How many of you get gas in your car? Okay, we all do that. But we have this little thing of plastic that we swipe for the convenience because it takes less time, right? But what if instead of swiping the card, we actually went in to give us the opportunity to get to know the person behind the counter? What if when you go to your local grocery store, you kind of look for the same person and you remember their name, you call them by name, and you ask them about themselves as opposed to giving your frequent shopper card and making sure your receipt's right? Right? It's thinking about things in a different way. How can I be a blessing to someone? How can I lighten someone's day? I always say it always freaks people out, and the further south I go, the more freakier it is. I love holding doors open for men. I love it. Not that I don't appreciate a door being held for me. I don't want you to hear that. But sometimes you just see a man walking up, and I just wait a few extra seconds and leave the door, hold the door open for him. It's like, wow. So have a great day. It's so unexpected, right? Sometimes when you're at the grocery store and you see somebody struggling to unload their cart. Now, y'all, you have to be careful when you do this, right? You don't want to be stalking. And I usually say something long before I actually get to the cart, so that you don't sneak up on them and scare them. Is there, I'm just wondering, is there anything I could do to help you? Do you need some help? And it's amazing the number of times that someone might say, yeah, I could use a little help. And you can strike up a conversation, right? My co-writer often tells the story of offering blessings. He was traveling and was in the airport, and his flight had been delayed, so you get a little grumpy when those things happen. And he said, so a family with 4 children sat down in the booth next to him at a restaurant in the airport. He was just like, I just wanted to kind of chill. And 4 children, really? So instantly he had formed the thoughts in his head that this was going to change his experience in the restaurant. But as he began to soak in what was going on over there, he said these were the most well-behaved children. And what a delight it was to hear this family converse and have a good time and enjoy each other's company. So he tells the story that when he gets up to leave the restaurant, stops at the table and says, I just wanted to tell you something. First of all, when you walked in with 4 children, here was my thought, and I'm ashamed to say that. But he said, I just want you to know it's been such a pleasant experience to be sitting next to you all and seeing you all converse with one another. And there was a set of twins there that he made a remark about. And just, you all are great parents. And I just wanted you to know what a joy it was for me to be able to be with you today. Now, how many people would actually stop and offer a blessing to someone? We're quick to complain, but are we as quick to offer blessings to people when we have the opportunity? And it's amazing when you do that, the conversations that it opens up. The other thing you might want to think about is you have unchurched friends, you might even have unchurched family. So who are the people you know that I need to know? How can you put together small social events where it's purposeful that churched and unchurched people might come together just to hang out and have a good time? We don't have to always come together as a first step for a Bible study. People are looking first to see if we're people they want to hang out with. We really need to show them that United Methodist can have a good time. That we can be fun to be around. That we go beyond casseroles and pie sales. Right? So what are the ways that we're opening ourselves up to other possibilities and other people? The other thing is the organizations that you're already a part of, where are those connections with other people? So in other words, if you belong to the Lions Club, there's Lions Club members that belong to other organizations, and how can you say, could I come and do a guest presentation, or could I come and sit in, or how can you find other ways through your existing contacts to meet people? Right? It's with intentionality, and it's also being strategic. All right. So once you begin to build a relationship with someone, what does it look like from there? Because, boy, that one with Sandy looked a little strange, didn't it? How did that happen? Because that's not going to be your story. That's probably not going to be the next thing that I even run into when God slaps me upside the head and said, okay, you're up. Batter up. But we first have to be open to starting conversations. Just start conversations. Now, how do you start conversations? Well, one of my other favorite things in life is traveling, and I specifically love to travel to Cabo San Lucas. And so anytime I see anything Cabo San Lucas, it's like, wow, hey, do you go there? Where do you stay when you go? What's your favorite restaurant when you go? Hey, have you checked out Salvatore's, the best lasagna in the world? But the other thing you might even say is, hey, I love that necklace. That is absolutely beautiful. You might also say something about the car they drive or the child that's with them. Just notice something and start a conversation. It's easier than you think when you become intentional and strategic about it. When you want to, you can. So first we have to start the conversation. And then over time, after you start the conversation, then we have to get their name. Because how can it be open and honest and transparent and authentic when we don't even know their name? And it might start with just a first name, and that's okay, just like it did with Sandy. And a lot of times people wear name tags when you're out and about. Notice name tags, call them by their name. And then the other thing that's interesting when you're thinking about name tags is, do you all wear name tags out in the community? Pastors, have you thought about that? And if it says, Reverend Blake, rather than Blake, Because sometimes when we lead with the other, it's maybe a little off-putting because, again, there might be some baggage with some church stuff that people have been into. Or if it says, Ex United Methodist Church, Blake. So play around with name tags and see which one strikes up more conversation than others. It may be different for your context, but name tags sometimes make you approachable. Sometimes. But play with that, especially pastors. And laity, when you're out on behalf of the church, wear your name tags too. Do you have cards to leave for people? And it may be your business card, but it may be your evangelism card of how to reach you for next steps in growing closer to Christ. So you start conversations, you get your name, you get their name, and over time, you're going to watch for signals or listen for signals. Because there's times when they're going to start talking to you about what's really going on. They're going to give you a hint, or you're going to be able to notice something about what they've said that would allow you to take the next step in conversation. So notice for those, watch for those. Don't push it. Have it a natural flow. And this is where, again, you can't say, well, on the first visit, you do X, Y, and Z. On the second visit, you do A, B, and C. Relationships aren't like that. If that was the case, we would all have been married at exactly the same time into each relationship. So if the magic number was you date for 1 year, so on day 366 of all of our relationships, we would have been married. But it didn't work that way. All the relationships proceed in different ways, at different paces. So we've got to be willing to walk in that dance. So then what we're looking for are those bridge building phases. So sometimes it's noticing what they have on, something that you notice about their appearance or with them. And it opens up something beyond just pleasantries. You know how you just say, hey, how are you? Great day. It opens up the conversation for something more. And then you're also looking for those opportunities then to share your faith. And again, folks, that's not right out of the gate. It's on down the line. And I can't tell you when that's going to be, but you'll know. You'll know when they're ready. Because God lets you know that they're ready. I'm going to give you something else to try for fun. So the next time you're in a restaurant and the waiter or waitress comes to you and takes your order, give them an order, and then just say, I just wanted to let you know that before our meal comes, we're going to be praying for our meal. And is there anything that we can be in prayer for you about? Now, sometimes they're going, no, that's okay. And others will go, really? And some will say no. And then when they come back the next time, they'll say, I've been thinking. Sometimes what happens is that in itself opens up a whole new conversation. Well, yeah, I would appreciate you being in prayer for my son and I. You see, my husband just left me. And we are now without a home, and I am struggling to make ends meet. Yes, would you please pray for us? Now, I don't have to stay, do I? No, you're welcome to, but no, you don't have to stay and pray with us. Okay, good. That's all right. And sometimes you get the best service when you do those kinds of things. Now, just a little side note. Do you know when you talk with servers, what is the worst tip day? Sunday. So whether there's any direct correlation or not, just think about that. Because what, again, is that saying about us as church folks? And sometimes not only are we not the best tippers, but we're the most impatient folks, right? It's all about beating the Baptist. So every time we're out and about in the world, we're giving signals. What signals are you giving out? And also, what signals are you paying attention to in receiving back? And all of this is our individual work, not just pastors, but laity. Each and every one of us are called to be out in the world, noticing people, getting names, building relationships, and over time, after we've built those relationships, telling our faith stories. So over the last 2 or 3 years, once we wrote Get Their Name, we've had more and more congregations that have just said, how do we get traction with this? Because we'll have 2 or 3 or 6 or 8 of you come, and you're all fired up, and you go back to the church, and they don't get it. Right? It's hard to build that contagiousness, that passion with people back at the church. So first of all, my challenge to you is you need to share right away. Don't let it sit, because every day that it sits, your passion will lose some of the flame. The flame will get more and more dim. So share quickly. The prayer team is certainly important to get going as quickly as possible, because that will fan the flames for you. Now, you all were given the book as part of this summit. All right? Now, I'm going to really confuse you, so just hold with me for a minute. Originally, we wrote a workbook that is a session to go with each of the 10 chapters. So it's 10 sessions with the 10 chapters of the book. And that was for your leaders and your staff to dig deep into what this meant and internalize, how do we do this? How do we make this a part of our DNA? And then you all ask for more. How do we share this with our congregation even broader than that? So just 2 weeks ago, so you're the first event that I've been able to do with these new materials. Just 2 weeks ago, Abington Cokesbury was able to put out even more resources. So the newest resource is for you all to be able to do what we call Get Their Name for congregations. So what that means is there is a book. It's called the Coordinator's Guide. And pastors, there are sermon outlines for you for the 4-part sermon series. The coordinator will tell you what you need to do with your worship teams and what you need to do to advertise, what you need to do to prepare your small group leaders, and so on. So this is the one-stop shopping to be able to put the Get Their Name for congregations together. All right? And then you can put groups together that will study the 4 different sermon series on Get Their Name. So then there's a participant workbook that allows you to internalize and get a whole congregational study going together with the sermon series. All right? And then there's the DVD that are conversation starters for the small groups. So you don't have to have people to teach small groups, because that's very intimidating. You just have to have facilitators that can ask the questions in the book and plug in the DVD. Okay, and then there's a promotion video to help you promote the series in your church. So Cokesbury was getting so much requests for, how do we do this as a congregation? This is the new set that's available, and Cokesbury stocked this today for you all that want to go back and get some traction with this at the local church. So let's recap where we've gone today. First of all, folks, we have to get comfortable and acknowledging our own faith stories. We got to start there. We got to start looking for it. And then we got to start small. We got to start sharing in our small groups. That's the safe places to start and to practice. And then when we're comfortable there, we're going to start sharing in worship. And then when we're comfortable there, we're going to start sharing it with the unchurched out in our community. And then we make the big old circle to teach people that being a disciple is about sharing your faith story. Y'all, I'm more than 30. And through baptism, thank you. Somebody said no way. Thank you. I had a significant birthday a few months ago, so I really appreciate that. But nobody told me how to share a faith story. I don't even think we talked about faith stories when I was baptized, when I was confirmed, and in Sunday school class. But folks, how do we build a culture where that's just part of who we are? Rather than being an adult and now going, really? That's part of this? Never thought about that. How do we make it part of our culture, part of our DNA, part of who we are, part of our nature? That we are so excited, that we are so passionate about this relationship, this Jesus Christ that we all say that we're disciples of, that we can't help but share it. Because, folks, that's what it's going to take, is a movement of us getting to the point of being comfortable, passionate, and called to share our faith stories, not only inside the church, but most importantly, outside the church, with people that don't know Jesus Christ. Start conversations, get a name, build relationships over time, share your faith story, and then lead them back into the gathered community of faith. Y'all, this is nothing new. This is biblical, but it is something new that we must do. Are you the ones, are each and every one of you willing to be the generation that said, no more decline on our watch. We're going to reach new people and do a new thing. That younger, more diverse people are knowing Christ because the United Methodist in Arkansas have been revived into reaching new people. The Spirit here today gives me the feeling that it can happen right here and right now. And it's all up to you all. So go, get names, build relationships, share your faith stories. Thank you so much for having me.